A little over a week ago, I built two different systems here on the channel, and I was running an experiment to go a little bit more in depth as to the Xeon, which we use the X3450, which is pretty much 10 years old now, and I wanted to compare it against the Ryzen 5 1400, which currently on AliExpress can be had for around $60, and the Xeon can be had for a little over $10. And now there is a lot more to this comparison than just performance with an RX 580, at least for someone like me who does regularly flip PCs and enjoys the whole used price performance passion a lot more than someone building new PCs, I guess, would. And so with this, we had both the systems, and I'll put the links for these PCs up here and also in the description, where we put together a Xeon system with an X3450 and an RX 580 for $186 US, and that included a monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and that was a really good deal. Some of the best deals I got, put it in together with a system, and we just had an epic setup. And it was a perfect comparison compared to the Ryzen situation, where I used the same case, very similar power supply, same graphics card, pretty much the same deals that I used in the $186 US setup, and we came out with 301 USD, where the only differences were we used the Ryzen 5 1400 CPU, an A320 motherboard, and also DDR4 memory. So that did raise the cost of the build, at least in percentage terms, quite substantially to that of the Xeon. And since I wanted to flip both these PCs, I decided to then do an experiment where I'd flip them with my profit on top, a set amount for both PCs, and then see how long it took to sell both rigs so I could formulate a better opinion, at least to, I guess, why I do like these older Xeons and why they shouldn't be ruled out, especially if you're into building gaming systems on a budget. But first of all, let's just get the results out of the way, then we'll talk about all the extra nitty-gritties, which in this case, they're probably not nitty-gritties, since for me, they make up a big chunk of the reason why I still like the older Xeons. If you are in the market for some KFC or a 9900 KF minus the C, then a Phantom Gaming X motherboard from ASRock may be your best choice. With a massive heatsink covering 3 M.2 NVMe slots, a beefed up VRM to handle this CPU even when it's maxed overclocked on air or water, and a 2.5G solution, as well as amazing onboard audio, this board has it all. Links in the description below to check out more. So a quick recap of that performance. We did use the exact same RX 580 in both these systems, and although I did have a few RX 580s on hand, I did flip them with different RX 580s. But basically we got the Ryzen 5 1400 to 3.9 GHz all-core clock, which is well above that of the stock 3.2 GHz. And then also on the Xeon side of things, we got that to 4 GHz, which is well above that of the 2.8-ish all-core boost that it has out of the box. So both these systems overclocked quite well. And we saw with the results, at least at 1080p on ultra settings across 4 different games, it was pretty much a neck and neck battle with the RX 580. Where in Battlefield 5, they pretty much scored the same. GTA 5, it went to the Ryzen 5 1400. Dota 2 surprisingly went to the X3450. That was after we disabled the Spectre and Meltdown patches. And then Firestrike went to the Ryzen 5 1400, and F1 2019 had a slight victory for the Xeon. So pretty much with both these CPUs is they do a fine job of handling an RX 580 at 1080p. And with the RX 580 and the RX 470, 570, and those secondhand cards coming up on the market, they are extremely good value for money. In 2019, they're pretty much my go-to graphics card if you want to get amazing value for money when you're building a used PC. But with that performance aside, there is a lot more than meets the eye. First of all, the Xeon X3450, it's still got some life left in it, even in 2019. And especially at its price point, and given what I built both these systems for, it's coming in at a price well below that of the Ryzen 5 1400 system. So its big advantage is its price performance, at least coupled with an RX 580. However, the Ryzen 5 1400 does have its advantages, where that has the instruction sets like AVX2, and it'll support the latest titles coming out where you won't come into any hiccups. But more importantly, you actually get an upgrade path on the Ryzen system, where, for instance, in a couple of years' time, you could update to a Zen 2 6-core and you'd still be absolutely fine. As opposed to the old Xeon system, you got DDR3 and you're pretty much maxing out that LGA 1156 socket, so you're pretty much at the end of the road with the Xeon system. You also get newer features on the AMD motherboard side like USB 3 and M.2 usually included on the motherboard, And of course, using DDR4 memory, you can use that in future builds, or at least until DDR5 memory hits the market. However, with that said, here's where things start to take a drastic turn in favor, at least for me personally, to the older Xeons, and that's when I put these up for sale. I had priced them accordingly with the profit margins the same on both builds, meaning I put the Ryzen system up for 700 Aussie dollars with the whole setup, and then I put the Xeon system up for 530 Aussie dollars. So the 170 Aussie dollar difference was going to be a non-issue if I sold both those builds at their asking prices. And here's where things really surprised me, because the Xeon system sold within 3 days, and the person who bought it wanted more upgrades in that they asked for 32 gigabytes of RAM. They also asked for a 1 terabyte SSD. So that brought the total build cost up an extra $120 when I take away, because I got to keep the 120 gigabyte SSD and also the 2 hard drives. And I then sold that build for 750 Aussie dollars total, which made the profit margin to that of 355 Aussie dollars, or basically 240 USD. And in this time, I was also sitting on the Ryzen build, and that eventually got an offer, a genuine offer, because I had some much lower offers in that time, of 640 Aussie dollars. And so I decided to sell it because that was the only offer that came through that was genuine. And so we made 235 Aussie dollars profit on the Ryzen 5 1400 system, aka 158 US dollars, but we had to take away 13 US dollars for the price of a Windows 10 Pro key on that system, since our Xeon system already had one activated on the motherboard beforehand, so we didn't have to add that to the build costs. So it's at this point in time a realization came to me, and that is the Xeons are still awesome, and if you're a Xeon hater, I don't know why you're hating on them. I mean, I like both the Ryzen 5 1400 and I like the Xeon X3450. I think they're great CPUs, especially when they're readily available on AliExpress, and you can then get the motherboard and you don't have to worry too much because the CPUs are relatively inexpensive. And in this case, I sold the Xeon system faster and I made more money on it. And I guess with a lot of people, upgrading really isn't a factor when it comes to buying a PC, at least a whole complete PC off a marketplace. I guess a lot of people, even myself included, I like to build systems and then roughly in 2 or 3 years or even 4 years if they're good enough, I like to then resell them and just start all over again so you can then piece together a build with, I guess, the best synergy at the time. And so when we look at the Xeon system, it doesn't really have the option to upgrade, but it's a one-time system and it's sold really well. When we look at the Ryzen 5 1400 system, yes, that's got upgradability, but here's where another real point of worry comes in for me personally, and that is we got the case and power supply for a really good deal, but when you're starting to spend more money, and in the future when you're upgrading to better GPUs, better CPUs, you're probably going to need a better power supply than the one we used, and you're most likely going to want to get a better case with better aesthetics. And not only that, when I'm selling things on the secondhand market, the more I charge for them, generally the better looking they have to be. I've said this in the past, you should always correlate your build price to the aesthetics as well. That's a big factor. I'm pretty sure someone out there wouldn't want to pay good money for an RTX 2080 Ti system, for example, that's in a case from 2005. But on the opposite hand, if the price is cheap enough, I know someone surely wouldn't mind buying a cheaper PC with good aesthetics. So you can see that for me personally, when it comes to flipping these things, I like to keep the build cost as low as possible when I'm using cheaper cases and also mediocre power supplies, because that upgrade path really isn't a thing for me personally, and I don't see it a thing for someone who wants to save money. The next two things are the motherboard and the graphics card. You may wish to upgrade the graphics card in the future, and then you may wish to upgrade the motherboard if DDR5 comes out. So you can see by the time you're done upgrading the case, power supply, motherboard, GPU, you pretty much got a whole new system on your hands. And so that's why I'm not a real big fan of upgrading personally, even though I know some people are. In fact, I feel like with upgrading, you should put together a system, and if you've got really good deals at the time, you should get all those deals and just have like a stopgap CPU until you can afford a better CPU in a couple of months. That's usually how I like to do upgrades, and how I recommend them is a short time frame as opposed to a longer time frame. And lastly, when it comes to making sense out of all the arguments I've raised here today with the Xeon build versus the Ryzen build, the answer is they're both fine, and that's the whole thing about PC gaming. Do whatever you want to do and really don't rag on other people if they've got an opinion and it's working for them. As you guys can see with the Xeons, I love the older Xeons because they quite simply work well for me, and they work well for a lot of other guys, at least the guys out there in the audience. I know you guys, a lot of you guys love these older Xeons, and even in 2019, they still represent phenomenal value for money. The Ryzen 5 1400 system, it of course has its perks, but for me flipping PCs, I feel like I've got to spend more money on a bling-worthy case in order for it to justify that higher price tag. So if you guys want to see more experiments where perhaps I do add even more onto the next Ryzen system, and then I'll add it onto the final cost and see if it sells better, then I'd love to do that experiment too for you guys. Just let us know in the comments if you want to see that happen. Also, let us know in the comments section below what you think about today's comparison. We did go a little bit more in depth than the usual just performance figures, because for me personally, there is a lot more to it. And at the end of the day, I don't think any one opinion is right or wrong, and especially my opinion in this video is just an opinion. And I hope this alternative line of thinking, especially if you're an anti-Xeon guy before this video, sort of changes your thinking a little bit as to why I still like me older Xeons. And with that aside, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button for us, and I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.